Monday's Moohead radio show has received some comments from people who were not pleased with my point of view about the NFL and about the need for the NFL to make vaccination for the COVID virus mandatory to their players. And I want to take a simple opportunity to give you a simple explanation. People tend to over-emotionalize this. Me personally, I think people who believe that the vaccine is a form of mind control are mentally ill. Okay? You get flu shots all these years and all that, and nobody ever brought this up. Now all of a sudden, in the era of doubt, where everything is being questioned and turned into these bizarre conspiracy theories, there have to be better reasons why you don't get vaccinated. The best one I'm getting from the people who are complaining about my point of view is it is my right to get it or not to get it. And I totally agree with you. Let me explain to you the difference between a mandatory NFL commitment that all of its players get vaccinated and holding people down on a table with straps and forcing a needle into their arm. Let's get real for a minute, folks, because you're not children. Nobody is espousing, especially myself, that anybody barge into somebody's house and force them to take the vaccine. Naturally, an idiot would understand that we have free will and the choice to decide what we want to do, even if it's not in our best interest or the best interest in those around us. But it happens every day with every other thing too. The maniac who's going down the road 100 miles an hour in a 70 zone. Most of us adhere to a speed limit, not because we're being mind controlled, but because we want to drive more safely and not crash and die. And when somebody goes by at 100 miles an hour, we all get pissed because they're endangering the lives, not only of the driver, but of the people who are on the road with them. But nobody forces them by changing their car and forcing them to throttle their acceleration. Obviously, my feeling is that people don't understand the difference between making something mandatory as a means of employment, as the concept that if you want to work here, you need to be vaccinated. So I'll explain this very simply. And the news hit today, by the way, that Lamar Jackson has COVID and Gus Edwards for the Ravens. And the Ravens were one of the teams that had massive spread last year. And it's happening again before training camp even starts. So for those of you who suggest that this is not a problem, I live in Florida. It is a problem. It's a problem all over the United States. And it's a problem for both vaccinated and unvaccinated people. It's just a greater danger to people who are unvaccinated. When you try to do something for somebody's good and their argument is, but I have a right, it reminds me of a little screaming child holding his breath, waiting for his M&Ms until his mommy purchases them for him. Yes, they will rot his teeth, and yes, they will end up throwing sugar into his body. Yes, he may grow up becoming a diabetic. Adults, when we make decisions for ourselves, make dietary decisions. Some of them are not in our best interest, but you're free to buy whatever you want to buy at the grocery store. So I'll make this simple. NFL players have a choice. You take the vaccine if you want to play professional football. If you don't really want to take it and you want to remain unvaccinated, you cannot play in the National Football League. And I really want to point out something that really irritates me personally about the narrow point of view that people are expressing who have a problem with this. I mentioned the name Colin Kaepernick, who decided to take a knee during the national anthem. And that one motion gesture started a whole bunch of social media, both ways, support, non-support. And the difference between Colin Kaepernick and a player who decides he doesn't want to get vaccinated is a pretty simple one. Under an arrangement where the NFL makes vaccination mandatory, a player knows if he doesn't get it done, he's not going to play in the NFL. He's not going to play football. I mean, Colin Kaepernick was not even given the decency of that explanation. He took a knee, and by doing what he felt was right, okay, by doing what he had a right to do in a free country, which he had a right to do. We can argue whether it really made any difference or not, and whether it was done to self-promote himself. Well, we can argue the reasons why he did it, just like I can argue the reasons why you refuse to get a vaccine. But that's not what I'm here for. What I'm saying is Colin Kaepernick did not realize when he took that knee that he would never play another snap in the NFL ever again. That was not a term of his employment. That was a punishment that was doled out to him. I do not believe in punishment. What I believe is that people make choices that affect their lives. And let's be honest about this. Majority of the players who play in the NFL were great athletes in high school and got free 4-year rides to colleges around the United States. They had an ample time to educate themselves and prepare themselves for the workforce. And if they did what they were supposed to do, they would be prepared to enter the workforce in another capacity if they could not play NFL football. Now, they have a right to choose. You can take the vaccine and play, not take the vaccine and you don't play, and then you merge into the workforce like the rest of us regular working folks did, and they'll be no different than the fans who sit in the stadium and pay the price to watch the NFL games. And that's their choice. And I'm not trying to take that choice away from them. I'm not trapping them in the goddamn locker room and holding them up and having 6 people hold them to the ground while we stab them in the arm with a vaccine. Get real, would you please? This is not being forced on people. This is a choice that people will make. You want to play professional football? You got to get a vaccine. And the reason is you're not going to have a full season. The league isn't going to be able to operate. The worst possible players at the worst possible time are going to go down with COVID. And there is no way to control the fact that players can still get the variant, even if they are vaccinated, which seems to be the other excuse or explanation that people are making, which is a complete red herring in this. What we're talking about, 97.5% of all ICU and hospitalizations for COVID are happening to unvaccinated people. 97.5%. That leaves 2.5% of the population who are getting this even though they were vaccinated. My solution, or what I think the solution that the NFL should take, does not guarantee that people are not going to get COVID. The bottom line is, though, they're going to get it less symptomatically. It'll be less dangerous. I'm more concerned about these big, burly football players who have all this weight on their system and all this wear and tear on their system being forced into the ICU. You know, intensive care units where people die. And right now, 99.5%, 99.5 right here at the Sarasota Memorial Hospital of people who are in ICU, and in the last 30 days who have died of COVID, 99.5% were unvaccinated. Don't lecture me on facts or your fictions. The bottom line is this: if the player doesn't want it, doesn't have to get it. No problem whatsoever. You're not going to play in the NFL. And if you decide you do want it, that's great. Then you play in the NFL. Now, you should also be cautious about where you go because you're going to be in the midst of a bunch of unvaccinated people. But what we do know is that the people who do get the disease when they're vaccinated get a much milder version. Sometimes as little as runny noses, like they believe they have a cold and it comes and it goes because of the immunity factors. But they do get some of the symptoms. And the reason they get some of the symptoms is because they're not officially vaccinated against variants, and variants do have different changes. The argument that, oh, we're going to have different variants from now on now, that's because of the people who refuse to get vaccinated. The people who make the argument about that are the problem. They're the cause. Had we gotten vaccinated all earlier, the variant wouldn't have been able to take foot and take root in our country like it has. And now we're going through the same thing a second time. But again, this is about business. And as a fan, I want to point out that if I'm a Ravens fan, and I'm not, but if I were, I don't want to see the Ravens having to play an important game against the Browns without Lamar Jackson. Do you? I don't. Do you? I mean, do you really want to go into the most important game of the season, your playoff games, and you get wiped out by COVID because a bunch of people were allowed to play who were unvaccinated, had high viral loads, and spread it to a bunch of people in the locker room? That's it. I mean, as a fan of the game, I am paying for the opportunity to see this, and that's a choice that I make. I choose to pay for my DirecTV Sunday ticket so I can watch the games, not just my Browns, although that's my primary game, but I watch all of the divisional rivals so I can assess the skills of those teams and so I can talk about it on my podcast. But if there's nothing to talk about because we're talking about second and third string players and scabs, if you will, that are just being added onto rosters, there's nothing I really want to talk about. This is a very emotional and inflammable issue, and I am not backing down one iota. In fact, the news about Lamar Jackson only strengthens my argument. Lamar Jackson had COVID last year, and now he's got it again. I would bet he's not vaccinated. And you know something? He's going to get it again and again and again. And Ravens fans, don't be bitching, man. Don't be bitching when that happens. That's Lamar Jackson's choice. And whatever his reason is for not getting vaccinated, it's more important than working for his employer. It is more important than winning a Super Bowl. It is more important than his teammates' desire to get to the ultimate game. It is his personal choice. That's the way I look at it. And that's my explanation. So, to go again, real slowly, for those who are slow, the NFL putting in a mandatory vaccination law into effect does not mean that the NFL brings a bunch of hoodlums into the locker rooms and jacks them up and holds them against the floor or the wall and forces a needle in their arm. Players have to make a choice. Now, the NFLPA probably isn't going to go along with this, and they'll make a choice for the players that they have the freedom not to. Then we don't have football. And you know something? I don't have a problem with that either. I'd love to see the Browns win a Super Bowl. It would be great. But the bottom line is this. If the NFLPA and the NFL can't come to terms on something like this, there isn't going to be a league anymore, and there's going to be no games. And I'm not going to watch XFL quality football. So that's it. It is real easy, and this is all based on choices, free choices that people make. And for people, I see some of the people who are, in the chat room listening to what I'm saying, Bronk is saying, well, I can put them all up on screen, I suppose now, can I, yeah, and I think the fans in general, when you finally get into a position to have a winning team, and it's like, yeah, some guy who's a low-level player on the roster turns out to be unvaccinated and gets 10 people infected, yeah, that would piss off a lot of fans, and again, you see, this is the kind of thing, and I'm calling Brian out, and I'm not having him on this show for this reason, but I'm going to share his opinion because we're all entitled to opinion. I don't know, pigs dressed as cop socks during a professional game, never had to change them. But OBJ had to change his shoes in the middle of a Jets game because he ran the wrong sponsored shoe and customized them in a way that was considered illegal by the NFL. Again, I want to protect police officers. I want to protect professional football players, and I want to protect the fans. And my position is 100% correct in this, because nobody should be upset because they have the choice. They have the freedom to make whatever the choice is that they want to do. And that's what this country's about. I left Danville, Illinois as an owner of a radio station. And the reason I left the community and sold the radio station was because the president of the Chamber of Commerce of Danville, Illinois was a pedophile and made videos of retarded children committing sex acts. And they didn't do anything to him. And I sold the goddamn station because I made a choice that I didn't want to live in that fucking place. Okay? Sometimes it costs you money to make a decision. Sometimes if you really believe in something, you do what you have to do. And I understand that. And I'm giving everybody the opportunity to have the freedom to do that. What I'm not doing is allowing people to express the fact that they not only have a right to not get vaccinated, but they have a right to spread it to whomever they want to spread it within the context of their workplace, and it affects their employers, the ratings of the games, it affects the fans. No. Sorry, that's wrong. 100% wrong. You know, and it's, you know, there are going to be some people who agree with me, some people who don't. This is not a referendum about how effective the COVID vaccine is. We do know that it will lessen the symptoms if you do get reinfected. We know that. We have data on that. It means that if somebody gets sick, they're much less likely to spread it because they have a lower viral load. And I tried to explain that in the show. People don't want science. They just want emotion. And you're not going to get it from me. And if they have less of a chance to spread it, fewer players will get it. We'll get more full strength. And it will be more representative. The games will be much more representative of the quality of the teams and who deserves to move forward and who deserves not to. I mean, if the Browns don't whip Ben Roethlisberger's ass, you know, and rip him to shreds and go up 28-0 in that game, if they started Mason Rudolph instead in that game because Ben Roethlisberger was either sick with COVID or hurt, people would make the excuse, well, the Browns would never have beaten Pittsburgh with Big Ben. And we found out that's not true. We whipped their ass with Big Ben. All right? We wiped our ass with Big Ben. Fat, slow, arm damaged Ben Roethlisberger. We beat them fair and square. That's why we feel good about ourselves, because we beat a good team with their frontline players. It was their offensive line that was in there. It was all the people they needed to have, and they couldn't get it done. I don't want those excuses to tarnish what teams accomplish. And anybody who refuses to get this, it's simple. They can walk away from the game. And if I have to walk away from the game because there's no games being played, I'll do that. We all make our choices. It's real simple. So there you have that. And then we'll give Brian his one last far-right, alt-right insurrectionist opinion. Then bend over and we'll keep sticking you with every vaccine that there is all at one time and see what happens. You know, that's really amazingly ignorant. And I don't usually talk this way because I like Brian. Brian's a nice guy and we talk off the air. That's an incredibly irresponsible and ignorant statement. Nobody is sticking you with multiple vaccines at one time. That's just the kind of foolishness that tries to bring this to a boil so that the crazy people, and I'm sorry, Brian, you're crazy, okay? That doesn't make sense. Now, are you going to need boosters? Well, you do every year for the flu. You do. You take flu shots there, Brian? Anybody in your family take flu shots? Every year you go and take a flu shot. You want to know something? I never took a flu shot. Never took a flu shot in my life because the flu that was around the United States, it was not fun to have, but it did not kill you. It didn't send you to the ICU in most cases. Didn't do that. And I'll be honest with you, every flu season down here in Florida, I'm extra careful. Now, I didn't always wear a mask, but I never went to big congregational kinds of things where people were congregated in mass. I didn't do that. Didn't go to family house either. The members of my family's house when they were sick, I didn't do it. And I didn't get the flu. All right? But you want your cake and eat it too. You want to be able to go to Cedar Point or go to wherever you want to go and you don't want to be vaccinated. Well, then get sick. Then get sick. And when you're being wheeled into ICU, understand why it happened to you. That's your individual choice. By giving it to other people, that makes you, yes, a selfish prick because your personal point of view is more important than infecting other people. And we differ in our opinion of that. I think that makes you a pig. And I think there's a lot of pigs in society, and I talk about them all the time. The one percenters and the people who own everything. You know, I need a hearing aid. I find out six companies own all the manufacturing of every hearing aid that is made. 6. And if you find out how many beef slaughterhouses there are in America, you'd really freak out. It's unbelievable. It's in single digits. All the beef that's being produced and is being handled is being done in only a few different places now. Consolidation has hit everything. And those people are pigs. They don't follow cleanliness rules, and that's why we end up getting recalls on our food. That's why E. coli and salmonella runs prevalent in chicken and beef products, because they're not being processed cleanly, because the places are overloaded because they bought out every other place that processed the meat. This is the society we live in, and I'm tired of pigs. I'm just going to say, I'm not going to convince anybody to get vaccinated, but I'm a podcaster. I talk about sports. In my opinion, the NFL as a business has the right to do this just as much as the players have the right to say no and work someplace else. And that's what I would advise that they do. And for the fans, if your players can't play because of this, and we go a second year where we're playing, guys who just meet one another in the locker room 2 hours before a game, like Hans did with Baker Mayfield last year, then, I think you have a right to walk away and say, I'm done with football. You have that right, because you'll see me gone in a heartbeat. I don't want to watch that shit. I don't want to watch lesser talent. That's not my team. So I hope you understand now. And if it makes you angrier, well, I'm sorry. But I will triple down and quadruple down on this opinion, because I am right about this. And you wait when your favorite players go down during the season. You'll remember I spoke about this, and it all could be avoided in the vast majority of cases. And if your guy does get sick, he's going to get sick in a way that is not going to take such a long time to get him back. If you want to have your pass rusher at full strength, poor Myles Garrett, he was going at half speed by the end of the year. COVID just killed his ass. Those lingering symptoms would not happen if you were already had antibodies for the primary COVID infection. You would just have lesser symptoms and the players would be back on the field sooner. I hope I've explained myself simply. I will be back on Friday, and if I have to triple down, I will. Thanks. Bye.